Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Terra Nova, watching the massive alien space station grow larger on the main screen. The structure was unlike anything humans had ever built. It looked like a crystal flower made of metal and light, spinning slowly in the darkness of space. Jake had seen pictures of it in the briefing files, but seeing it with his own eyes was different. This was humanity's first real meeting with aliens, and Jake felt the weight of his entire species on his shoulders. Distance to the station? Jake asked his navigation officer. 2,000 kilometers in closing, Captain, came the reply. Dr. Lisa Blake walked up beside Jake, carrying a datapad filled with notes about alien cultures. She had spent years studying the signals Earth had received from these creatures. The aliens called themselves the Galactic Coalition, and they had been watching Earth for decades. Lisa knew this meeting would change everything for humanity. "Are you nervous?" Lisa asked Jake quietly. "A little," Jake admitted. "We're about to meet beings from 12 different worlds. They've been traveling between stars since before humans discovered fire. The Coalition had sent a message to Earth 6 months ago. They said they wanted to meet humanity and discuss bringing Earth into their alliance. But Jake had read the intelligence reports. The Coalition treated new species like children who needed protection. They gave them simple jobs and watched them carefully. Jake wondered if that was what they had planned for humans. "Captain Morrison," the communications officer called out. "We're receiving a transmission from the station." "Put it on screen," Jake ordered. The image changed to show a large room inside the alien station. 3 different creatures stood waiting for them. One looked like a giant lizard walking on 2 legs with green scales and yellow eyes. Another looked like it came from the ocean, with blue skin and gills on its neck. The third was the strangest of all. It seemed to be made of pure energy, shifting and glowing like a living star. The ocean creature stepped forward and spoke. Its voice came through the translator as smooth and calm. "I am Ambassador Niravel of the Coalition. Welcome to Border Station 7. We are honored to meet representatives of Earth." Jake straightened his uniform and nodded respectfully. "Thank you, Ambassador Vell. I am Captain Jake Morrison of the Earthship Terra Nova. This is Dr. Lisa Blake, our specialist in alien cultures." "We have prepared quarters for your delegation," Nira said. "We hope you will stay with us for several days while we discuss how Earth might join our peaceful alliance." Something in the way she said peaceful alliance made Jake feel uneasy, but he kept his expression neutral. "We appreciate your hospitality." 2 hours later, Jake and Lisa sat in a meeting room with the 3 alien representatives. The lizard creature had introduced himself as Zekthar, a military strategist. The energy being called itself Quintar and seemed to be some kind of scientist. "Tell us about Earth's defenses," Zekthar said, his voice rough and deep. "We must understand your capabilities before we can properly protect you." Jake and Lisa exchanged glances. They had prepared for this question. Dr. Blake activated a holographic display showing Earth's military technology. Images of human warships appeared in the air, along with pictures of weapons and defense systems. "These are our primary space vessels," Lisa explained. "They carry kinetic projectile weapons, chemical explosive missiles, and basic energy cannons." The 3 aliens looked at each other. Jake noticed something that might have been amusement in their expressions, though it was hard to tell with such different faces. "Kinetic projectiles?" Quintar asked, its energy form flickering. "You mean you fire solid objects at enemy ships?" "Yes," Lisa said. "Metal slugs accelerated to high speeds. They're very effective against armor." Zekthar made a sound that the translator turned into laughter. "How fascinating. We used similar weapons about 10,000 years ago before we discovered plasma technology." Jake felt heat rise in his cheeks, but he kept his voice steady. "They serve our needs well." "Of course they do," Nira said quickly, probably noticing Jake's discomfort. "Every species develops at its own pace. There is no shame in using older technology." The meeting continued for hours. The aliens asked about Earth's population, resources, and political systems. They seemed especially interested in human conflicts and wars. When Lisa mentioned that Earth had over 200 separate countries, all 3 aliens looked shocked. "You still fight among yourselves?" Zekthar asked. "Sometimes," Jake admitted. "But we've been working toward unity. The Earth Defense Force represents all nations in space matters." "Remarkable," Nira said. "Most species unify their planets before they reach the stars." Your people must be very individualistic. Jake wasn't sure if that was meant as a compliment or not. As the day went on, Jake began to understand how the aliens saw humanity. They thought humans were like children with dangerous toys. The Coalition had thousands of worlds and technology that could destroy planets. They saw themselves as wise guardians who needed to keep younger species from hurting themselves or others. We would be honored to offer Earth a junior partnership in the Coalition, Nira finally said. You would have protection from hostile forces and access to some of our safer technologies. In return, you would follow Coalition guidelines for space exploration and military development. Jake nodded politely. We appreciate the offer. Of course, we need to discuss this with our government before making any decisions. Naturally, Nira said. Take all the time you need. We know this is a big step for your people. That evening, Jake sent a coded message back to Earth. He told Admiral Carl Bennett about the meeting and his concerns about Coalition attitudes. The aliens seemed friendly enough, but they clearly thought humans were primitive and needed supervision. Jake also reported something else that worried him. During the tour of the station, he had noticed the aliens' weapons and defenses. They were certainly more advanced than human technology, but not impossibly so. Jake had expected aliens who had been traveling space for thousands of years to have godlike power. Instead, their technology seemed only a few centuries ahead of Earth's. Either the Coalition was hiding their real capabilities, or they weren't as advanced as they wanted humans to believe. Jake suspected the truth was probably somewhere in between. As Jake prepared for sleep in his guest quarters, he wondered what Earth's leaders would decide. The Coalition offered safety and knowledge, but at the cost of human independence. Jake had spent his whole career protecting human freedom. The idea of becoming a junior partner to alien overseers didn't sit well with him. Tomorrow would bring more meetings and more careful diplomatic dancing. But tonight, Jake stared out the window at the stars and wondered if humanity was about to make the biggest mistake in its history. 3 months had passed since the first meeting at Border Station 7. The talks between Earth and the Coalition continued, but tensions were growing. Humans had been exploring and settling new worlds for decades, but the Coalition claimed many of these systems as their territory. They called them buffer zones and said no one was allowed to live there without permission. Commander Pete Walsh sat in his office deep inside Earth Defense Force headquarters, reading intercepted alien communications. Pete was in charge of military intelligence, and his job was to learn everything he could about potential enemies. The Coalition hadn't declared themselves enemies yet, but Pete didn't trust them. Sir, his aide knocked on the door. Admiral Bennett wants to see you right away. Pete grabbed his files and hurried to the Admiral's office. Admiral Carl Bennett was a tough old soldier who had fought in the Mars Rebellion 20 years ago. He didn't like politicians or diplomats, and he especially didn't like aliens who thought they could tell humans what to do. What's the latest from our friends in space? Bennett asked as Pete sat down. Nothing good, sir, Pete replied, opening his datapad. The Coalition is getting impatient with our colonies in the Tau Ceti and Wolf 359 systems. They're demanding we abandon those settlements immediately. Bennett's face darkened. Those colonies have been there for 15 years. We had people living there before we ever heard of the Coalition. They don't care, sir. According to their messages, they're planning something called a demonstration of force. 3 battlecruisers are heading toward New Boston Colony in the Wolf system. When? Bennett asked sharply. They should arrive in 4 days, Pete said. The aliens think they can scare us into abandoning the colony just by showing up with big ships. Bennett stood up and walked to the window overlooking the training grounds below. Young soldiers were practicing with the latest human weapons. Plasma rifles, energy shields, and powered armor. They think we're primitives who will run away at the first sign of trouble. Yes, sir. Their battle plans are surprisingly simple. They expect to arrive, fire a few warning shots, and watch our colonists evacuate in panic. Bennett turned back to Pete with a grim smile. Maybe it's time we showed them what human primitives can really do. Get me Dr. Turner from Weapons Research. An hour later, Dr. Amy Turner arrived at Bennett's office. She was a small woman with gray hair and intelligent eyes, but Pete knew she was one of the most dangerous people on Earth. Amy designed weapons that could crack moons in half. Admiral, Amy said as she sat down, I assume this is about our alien friends. They're sending 3 ships to intimidate our colony at New Boston, Bennett explained. I want to make sure they get a proper welcome. Amy smiled, and Pete felt a chill run down his spine. What level of response are you authorizing? Nothing that will start a war, Bennett said carefully. But I want them to understand that humans aren't helpless. Level 1 conventional weapons only? Amy asked. Yes. Keep the real toys locked away for now. Pete didn't understand the conversation completely, but he knew about Earth's weapon classification system. Level 1 was the safest category, weapons that could destroy ships and cities but wouldn't damage entire planets. He had heard rumors about higher levels, but those files were far above his security clearance. I'll have our defense platforms ready, Amy said. The aliens should find our welcome quite educational. 4 days later, Pete watched the battle from the command center on Luna Base. The Coalition ships arrived at New Boston just as predicted. They were impressive vessels, each one 3 times larger than the biggest human warship. Their hulls gleamed with advanced armor, and energy weapons charged along their sides. This is War Chief Crix of the Coalition Defense Force, came the transmission from the lead alien ship. Human vessels in this system will withdraw immediately. You have 10 minutes to begin evacuation procedures. The response came from Captain Danny Rodriguez, commander of the New Boston Defense Force. This is Captain Rodriguez of the Human Defense Force. This system is human territory. You are the ones who need to leave. You dare challenge the Coalition? Crix's voice carried surprise and anger. Your primitive weapons cannot harm our ships. Let's find out, Rodriguez replied calmly. The battle began when the alien ships fired warning shots across the bows of human vessels. But instead of retreating, the humans fired back. The Coalition's first surprise came when human kinetic rounds punched through their energy shields like they weren't even there. How is this possible? Pete heard one alien commander ask over the intercepted communications. Their projectiles are moving faster than our computers calculated. Dr. Turner had explained this to Pete before the battle. Human kinetic weapons used gravity manipulation to accelerate projectiles to incredible speeds. The aliens expected simple gunpowder cannons, not weapons that could bend space itself. The second surprise came when human ships started using the asteroid belt as ammunition. Captain Rodriguez's tactical computer calculated the exact gravitational forces needed to redirect space rocks toward enemy vessels. The aliens found themselves dodged massive chunks of stone while trying to target the human ships. They're using the entire solar system as a weapon, another alien voice said, panic creeping in. But the biggest surprise came when the Coalition tried to retreat. Human ships didn't pursue them or try to capture their territory. Instead, they sent medical shuttles to help damaged alien vessels. Captain Rodriguez personally supervised rescue operations for injured alien crew members. Why are they helping us? War Chief Crix asked in confusion. We attacked their colony. Because that's what humans do, Captain Rodriguez replied over the open channel. We don't let people die if we can help them. Back on Luna Base, Admiral Bennett watched the alien ships limp away from New Boston. Their advanced hulls were cracked and their energy weapons were offline. But their crews were alive and their ships were still functional. Think they learned anything? Pete asked. Maybe, Bennett said. But I doubt they learned the right lesson. Pete knew what the Admiral meant. The aliens would probably think humans had been hiding their real military technology. They wouldn't understand that Earth had been fighting with training weapons. Dr. Turner's Level 1 systems were designed for police actions and minor conflicts. Humanity had weapons that could do much worse things, but they tried never to use them. Over the next few days, Pete monitored Coalition communications. The aliens were confused and frightened. They had never lost a battle to a species they considered primitive. Some of their military leaders were calling for massive retaliation. Others were demanding a complete review of their intelligence about human capabilities. Their pride is hurt, Dr. Turner explained during a briefing. They built their entire alliance on the idea that they're the most advanced species in the galaxy. When primitives with kinetic weapons beat their best ships, it challenges everything they believe. Admiral Bennett nodded grimly, which means they'll probably try something bigger next time. Yes, sir. War Chief Crix is already requesting permission to bring their heavy battle fleets into human space. Pete felt a knot form in his stomach. If the Coalition came back with their full military power, Earth would have to respond with stronger weapons. The careful dance of limited warfare might escalate into something much more dangerous. How long before they make their move? Bennett asked. 2 weeks, maybe 3, Amy replied. They need time to move their fleets and plan their strategy. Bennett was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he looked up at his advisors. Then we better be ready for them. Pete, I want intelligence on every coalition ship within 50 light years. Amy, prepare level 2 defensive systems but keep them hidden until the last possible moment. Pete nodded and left the office, his mind racing with preparations. The coalition thought they had been fighting humanity's best weapons. They had no idea what humans were really capable of when pushed into a corner. Pete just hoped they would never have to find out. Supreme Chancellor Vexhai floated in the center of the coalition's war room, its energy form pulsing with anger. The being was ancient, even by coalition standards, and had never experienced military defeat. The loss at New Boston had shaken the entire alliance to its core. Explain to me again how 3 of our finest battlecruisers were defeated by primitive humans, Vexhai demanded. War Chief Crix shifted uncomfortably. The reptilian warrior had led coalition forces for over 2 centuries, without a single defeat. Their weapons were more advanced than our intelligence suggested. They used gravitational manipulation and turned asteroids into projectiles. Gravitational manipulation? Vexhai's energy form flickered with surprise. That's level 5 technology in our classification system. Are you saying these humans have been lying about their capabilities? It's possible, Crix admitted. But their ship designs still appear primitive. And they helped our wounded instead of taking prisoners or pursuing our retreat. Ambassador Niravel spoke up from her position near the tactical display. Perhaps we misunderstood their intentions. Many species hide their true strength during first contact. Or perhaps, Vexhai said coldly, we have been too gentle with these humans. Ready the 7th Fleet. If they want to play games with us, we will show them what real power looks like. Back on Earth, General Rick Stone stood in the Situation Room deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. The room was filled with holographic displays showing coalition fleet movements throughout the galaxy. Rick had been fighting wars since he was 18 years old, first on Earth and then in the colonies. He understood tactics better than almost anyone alive. How many ships are they bringing? Admiral Bennett asked. 200 capital ships, 500 support vessels, and about 50 planet crackers, Rick replied grimly. This isn't a police action anymore. They're coming to conquer us. Dr. Helen Cross looked up from her psychological analysis reports. She was a small woman with kind eyes, but her mind could unravel alien thought patterns like others read books. They're not just angry about losing the battle. This threatens their entire identity as the supreme galactic power. What do you mean? Bennett asked. The coalition built their alliance on military superiority, Helen explained. Every species joined because they couldn't win a fight against coalition technology. If humans can beat them using primitive weapons, other species might start asking questions. Rick nodded grimly. So they have to crush us completely or their whole empire might fall apart. Exactly. They can't afford to lose another battle to humans. That's why they're bringing everything they have. Admiral Bennett studied the tactical displays for a long moment. The coalition fleet was 3 times larger than Earth's entire military. If this was a normal war, humanity would have no choice but to surrender. Rick, what are our options? Bennett asked. We can't fight them ship to ship, Rick admitted, but we don't have to. Dr. Turner has been working on some interesting defensive systems. Dr. Amy Turner entered the room carrying a sealed briefcase. Her face was serious as she set the case on the table and entered her authorization codes. Admiral, I need permission to deploy Level 2 defensive systems. Bennett hesitated. He knew about Earth's weapon classification system, but he'd never seen anything above Level 1 in actual use. What exactly are we talking about? Stealth ships that can phase through solid matter, Amy began. Weapons that manipulate time and space. Defensive fields that convert enemy fire into power for our own systems. That's impossible, Niravel said from the communication screen. She had been monitoring the conversation as part of the ongoing diplomatic talks. No species has technology that advanced. Amy looked at the alien ambassador with a slight smile. With respect, Ambassador, you might be surprised what humans consider basic defensive equipment. The coalition fleet arrived in human space 2 weeks later. Supreme Chancellor Vexhai commanded the operation personally from the massive dreadnought Eternal Victory. The ship was 5 kilometers long and carried enough firepower to destroy entire solar systems. Begin the attack, Vexhai ordered. Target their orbital defense platforms first. The coalition opened fire with plasma cannons and quantum torpedoes. Energy blasts that could vaporize mountains struck the human defense stations around Earth. But instead of exploding, the stations absorbed the energy and glowed brighter. What's happening? War Chief Crix demanded. Our weapons are making their defenses stronger, Impossible, Vexhai replied. No known technology can convert plasma fire into defensive energy. That was when the human counterattack began. Ships appeared out of nowhere, seeming to phase through coalition hulls before firing from inside enemy vessels. Other human ships moved in impossible patterns, bending space around themselves to avoid incoming fire. They're not following the laws of physics, one coalition captain reported in panic. Their ships are occupying the same space as our ships. Rick Stone watched the battle from his command center, coordinating human forces with quiet efficiency. The coalition had brought their best weapons and their finest ships, but they fought like they were playing a game with fixed rules. Humans, on the other hand, kept changing the rules. Phase Squadron, target their command ships, Rick ordered. Temporal Wing, use the gravity wells to slow their retreat vectors. Dr. Cross monitored alien communications, analyzing their psychological state as the battle progressed. They're completely confused, she reported. They've never faced tactics like this before. What do you mean? Bennett asked. The coalition fights wars like chess matches, Helen explained. Every move is calculated and predictable. But humans fight like they're playing a dozen different games at once. On the Eternal Victory, Supreme Chancellor Vexhai watched its mighty fleet being systematically disabled by human forces. The coalition ships weren't being destroyed. Their weapons were being neutralized, their engines disabled, their communication systems jammed. Why aren't they destroying us? War Chief Crix asked in confusion. They have us completely outmatched. The answer came from Captain Jake Morrison, whose voice suddenly filled the coalition command center. Because we don't need to destroy you to win. How are you speaking to us? Vexhai demanded. Our communications are encrypted. Your encryption is based on mathematical principles we solved 300 years ago, Jake replied calmly. But that's not important. What matters is that this war ends now. Admiral Bennett's voice joined the conversation. Supreme Chancellor, your fleet is completely disabled. We could destroy every ship you have, but we prefer not to. Order your forces to withdraw and we'll provide assistance for repairs. Vexhai's energy form flickered with disbelief. You defeated our finest fleet and you want to help us? That's what civilized species do, Bennett replied. They protect life, even enemy life, when possible. The coalition retreat took 3 days. Human engineers worked alongside alien technicians to repair damaged ships and treat injured crew members. The aliens watched in amazement as their former enemies provided food, medical supplies, and technical assistance. War Chief Crix found himself working beside a human engineer named Tom Parker to repair the Eternal Victory's engines. I don't understand your people, Crix admitted. You could have conquered our entire fleet. Tom looked up from the power coupling he was repairing. Why would we want to conquer you? We just wanted you to stop attacking our colonies. But you have superior technology, Crix said. In coalition space, superior species dominate inferior ones. That's the natural order. Maybe that's your problem, Tom replied. Humans learned a long time ago that being stronger doesn't give you the right to hurt others. As the coalition fleet finally limped away from human space, Supreme Chancellor Vexhai sent a final message to Admiral Bennett. This conflict is not over, human. You have shown capabilities far beyond our intelligence estimates. We will return with proper preparation. Bennett's response was calm but firm. You're welcome to try, Chancellor. But next time, maybe consider talking instead of shooting. In the aftermath of the battle, Dr. Cross compiled her psychological analysis of the coalition leadership. Her conclusions were disturbing. The aliens weren't just confused by human technology, they were terrified by human restraint. They can't understand why we didn't conquer them, Helen explained to the command staff. In their experience, advanced species always dominate primitive ones. The idea that humans have superior weapons but choose not to use them completely breaks their worldview. General Stone nodded grimly, which means they'll keep coming back until they figure out what we're really capable of. Or until we show them, Dr. Turner added quietly. Admiral Bennett looked around the room at his advisors. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. Elder Zarthun moved slowly through the ancient archives deep beneath the Coalition's capital world. The old scholar was one of the few beings who remembered the early days of the Alliance, when the Coalition was just 3 species working together for mutual protection. Now, at over 800 years old, Zarthun spent most of his time studying historical records that others had forgotten. But today was different. The defeats at New Boston and in the Great Fleet Battle had shaken the coalition to its core. Supreme Chancellor Vexhai had ordered a complete review of all historical records, searching for any mention of humans or similar species. Zarthun was the only one with access to the deepest archives. The Elder pulled up files that hadn't been accessed in 50,000 years. Most were corrupted or incomplete, but one record made him stop breathing. It described a species that had vanished from galactic civilization long before the coalition was formed. The description matched human psychological profiles exactly. Impossible, Zarthun whispered to himself, but he kept reading. The ancient record spoke of a race called the Architects. They had possessed technology beyond anything the modern galaxy had ever seen, but instead of conquering other species, they had simply disappeared one day, leaving behind only empty worlds and abandoned star systems. The file contained a final message from the Architects' leadership. We have become too dangerous to remain among the children of the galaxy. Our weapons have grown beyond wisdom, and our nature tends toward total victory in all conflicts. For the safety of all life, we withdraw to the dark spaces between stars. Zarthun's hand shook as he forwarded the file to Supreme Chancellor Vexhai. If humans were descendants of the Architects, then everything the Coalition thought they knew about galactic power was wrong. Meanwhile, on Earth, Professor Gary Webb stood in front of a group of Coalition representatives who had come to discuss peace terms. Gary was a military historian who specialized in human warfare, and he had been asked to brief the aliens on Earth's military development. To understand human military doctrine, Gary began, you need to understand our history of conflict. The holographic display behind him showed images of ancient human wars, armies with spears and shields, sailing ships with cannons, and finally the terrible weapons of the 20th century. For most of our history, humans fought with whatever tools they could make, Gary continued. But about 300 years ago, we reached a turning point. The display changed to show mushroom clouds rising over destroyed cities. The Coalition representatives, including Ambassador Niravel and War Chief Crix, watched in horrified fascination. Nuclear weapons, Gary explained. The first weapons humans created that could destroy entire civilizations. We used them twice in warfare, then realized we had created something too terrible to use again. But you continued to make them, Crix observed. Yes, but only as a deterrent, Gary said. We learned that having ultimate weapons and choosing not to use them was more powerful than using them. Dr. Nina Clark entered the briefing room carrying a sealed container. She was the head of quantum weapons research, and one of the few humans authorized to handle humanity's most dangerous technology. Professor Webb has been showing you our conventional weapons, Nina said as she set the container on the table. With the Admiral's permission, I'd like to demonstrate something from our restricted arsenal. Ambassador Nira leaned forward with interest. Restricted arsenal? Everything we've used against the Coalition so far falls under Level 1 classification, Nina explained. These are weapons we consider safe for normal warfare. What I have here is a Level 3 device, still far below our most dangerous technology. How many levels are there? Crix asked nervously. 9, Nina replied. No weapon above Level 3 has ever been deployed in actual combat. Nina opened the container to reveal a device no larger than a coffee cup. It looked harmless, just a silver sphere with a few blinking lights. This is a quantum destabilizer, Nina explained. It works by converting matter directly into dark energy. Would you like to see a demonstration? The Coalition representatives agreed, so Nina arranged for a test in an isolated star system 50 light-years from Earth. The target was a small moon about the size of Earth's satellite. Coalition observers watched from a safe distance as Nina's device was placed on the moon's surface. Activation in 3, 2, 1, Nina announced. The moon simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there. The next moment there was nothing but empty space and a brief flash of dark energy. The conversion was 99.7% efficient, Nina reported calmly. Total time from activation to complete matter dissolution was 0.3 seconds. The silence on the Coalition observation ship lasted for several minutes. Finally, Ambassador Nira found her voice. How is this possible? Basic quantum mechanics, Nina replied. We've been working with these principles for over 2 centuries. War Chief Crix's voice was barely a whisper. And this is only Level 3? Yes. Our Level 9 weapons are designed for threats to the entire galaxy, Nina said matter-of-factly. though we hope never to use them. That evening, Captain Jake Morrison met with the Coalition representatives in a more informal setting. The aliens were clearly shaken by what they had witnessed, and Jake wanted to help them understand human thinking. "Why do you limit yourselves?" Nira asked. "If you have such powerful weapons, why not use them to bring peace to the galaxy?" Jake considered his answer carefully. "Because we learned something important about ourselves. Humans have a natural tendency toward total warfare. When we fight, we don't stop until our enemies are completely defeated." "That sounds efficient," Crix observed. "It's also terrifying," Jake replied. "In our early space age, we almost destroyed ourselves several times. We realized that our greatest enemy wasn't aliens or hostile environments, it was our own nature." "So you created artificial limits," Nira said, beginning to understand. "Exactly. We found that true strength isn't the ability to destroy everything in your path. True strength is having that ability and choosing not to use it." The conversation was interrupted by an urgent message from Elder Zarthun. The ancient files he had discovered were being transmitted to both human and coalition leadership. As Jake read the historical records, his face grew pale. "You recognize this?" Ambassador Nira asked, noticing Jake's reaction. "The architects," Jake said quietly. "We have legends about them in our oldest databases. We always thought they were just stories." "According to our records, they were your ancestors," Nira said. "They possessed technology that could reshape reality itself, but they chose exile rather than risk harming other species." Jake nodded slowly. "That explains a lot about human psychology. We inherited both their power and their conscience." Dr. Nina Clark joined the conversation after reviewing the files. "The architect's final message mentions weapons beyond anything we've developed. If those records are accurate, humanity might have genetic memories that prevent us from building our most dangerous potential weapons." "What do you mean?" Crix asked. "We might be unconsciously limiting ourselves," Nina explained. "Our ancestors programmed restraint into our very DNA to prevent us from becoming too dangerous." Captain Jake looked out the window at the stars, thinking about the implications. "So when we tell you that we're fighting with training weapons, we're not trying to threaten you. We're trying to warn you." "Warn us about what?" Nira asked. "About what humans become when we stop holding back," Jake said quietly. "The architects left the galaxy because they were afraid of themselves. What we've shown you so far, the stealth ships, the quantum weapons, the matter conversion devices, those are just the beginning." War Chief Crix's scales had turned pale. "Beginning of what?" Jake met his eyes with a serious expression. "Of what humans are capable of when we decide that restraint is no longer possible." The Coalition representatives sat in stunned silence, finally beginning to understand the true nature of their situation. They hadn't been fighting a primitive species with hidden technology. They had been fighting the descendants of beings so powerful that they had voluntarily exiled themselves from galactic civilization. Ambassador Nira spoke first. "What do you want from us?" "Peace," Jake said simply. "We want to live quietly in our corner of the galaxy, explore new worlds, and maybe help other species when we can. But we need you to stop trying to conquer us, and if we don't," Crix asked, though he already knew the answer. Jake's expression was sad but determined. "Then we'll have to show you why our ancestors left the galaxy, and nobody wants that." The meeting room aboard Border Station 7 had never hosted such an important gathering. Representatives from all 12 coalition species sat around a circular table, their various forms creating a strange but impressive display of galactic diversity. Across from them sat the human delegation, led by Admiral Carl Bennett and Ambassador Kate Ryan. But the most unusual presence in the room was the entity that had introduced itself simply as the synthesis. It appeared as a shifting geometric pattern of light and shadow, ancient beyond measure and possessing knowledge that predated the coalition by millions of years. "I have watched this conflict with growing concern," the synthesis began, its voice somehow reaching every mind in the room simultaneously. "The children of the architects have returned to galactic civilization, and few understand what this means." Supreme Chancellor Vexhi's energy form flickered with nervous energy. "You claim to know about the architects? They vanished 50,000 years ago." "They did not vanish," the synthesis corrected. "They chose exile. I was there when they made that decision. I was their creation, designed to preserve knowledge and watch over the younger species they left behind." Dr. Jack Palmer, Earth's chief philosophy advisor, leaned forward with interest. You're an artificial intelligence created by our ancestors? I am the last remnant of their civilization, the synthesis confirmed. And I have been waiting for their descendants to mature enough to understand the choice their ancestors made. Ambassador Kate Ryan spoke carefully. What choice was that? The synthesis projected images into the center of the room. Vast fleets of ships unlike anything the modern galaxy had ever seen. Weapons that could ignite stars, and technology that bent the very fabric of reality. The architects became too powerful, the synthesis explained. Their natural aggression, combined with unlimited technological advancement, made them the ultimate predators. They could have conquered the entire galaxy within a century, but they didn't, Admiral Bennett observed. No, they developed something even more powerful than their weapons: wisdom. They realized that true strength lay not in the ability to destroy, but in the choice to preserve. War Chief Crix's reptilian features showed confusion. That makes no sense. Power exists to be used. The strong naturally dominate the weak. Dr. Jack Palmer stood up, his expression thoughtful. That's where you're wrong, War Chief. Human philosophy has spent thousands of years exploring this question. We learned that unlimited power without moral restraint leads to unlimited destruction. But surely survival requires using all available advantages, Ambassador Nira protested. Does it? Jack asked. Consider this. If a species becomes so powerful that it can destroy all other life in the galaxy, what happens when they turn that power on themselves? The architects realized they were approaching a point where their own nature would force them to destroy everything, including themselves. The synthesis nodded approvingly. The human philosopher speaks truth. The architects' final decision was unprecedented in galactic history. They chose voluntary exile rather than risk becoming galactic destroyers. Supreme Chancellor Vexhi's form pulsed with agitation. So humans inherited this power? The weapons we've seen are nothing compared to what they're truly capable of. Ambassador Kate Ryan answered carefully. We've inherited both the power and the responsibility. Every human child learns about the restraint protocols from an early age. We're taught that having the ability to do something doesn't give us the right to do it. Even in warfare? War Chief Crix asked. Especially in warfare, Admiral Bennett replied. When we fought your forces, we used Level 1 weapons. Equipment designed for police actions and minor conflicts. We have weapons that could crack planets, collapse stars, or even destabilize entire solar systems, but we've never used them in combat. Dr. Palmer activated a holographic display showing Earth's weapon classification system. Level 1 through 3 are considered conventional weapons. Level 4 through 6 are restricted to extreme defensive situations. Level 7 through 9 are classified as existential threat protocols. What does that mean? Nira asked nervously. Level 7 weapons can destroy solar systems, Palmer explained calmly. Level 8 can damage entire star clusters. Level 9 weapons are designed to fight threats to galactic civilization itself. The Coalition representatives sat in stunned silence. Finally, Elder Zarthun spoke from his position at the far end of the table. You're saying that everything you used against us, the stealth ships, the quantum weapons, even the matter converter, were your weakest military tools? Not our weakest, Kate corrected. Our most appropriate. We used exactly enough force to stop your attacks without causing unnecessary destruction. But why? Vexhi demanded. You could have conquered our entire alliance with ease. Because that's not who we choose to be, Admiral Bennett said firmly. The architects left us a legacy of power and wisdom. We honor both parts of that inheritance. The synthesis projected new images, peaceful worlds, diverse civilizations working together, and technology used for creation rather than destruction. This is what the galaxy could become if species learned to value restraint over domination. War Chief Crix looked around the room, his worldview crumbling. For 8 centuries, the Coalition has maintained peace through superior firepower. Every species joined us because they couldn't win a war against our technology. And how well has that worked? Dr. Palmer asked gently. How many rebellions have you faced? How many species have tried to develop secret weapons to use against you? Crix's scales darkened with thought. 17 major revolts in the last century alone. Because your peace is based on fear, Palmer explained. Fear-based peace is always temporary. Eventually someone finds a way to fight back, or they decide that even death is better than submission. Ambassador Kate stood and walked to the viewing port, looking out at the stars. We're offering you something different. A peace based on mutual respect and shared ethical principles. You would share your technology? Ambassador Nira asked cautiously. Some of it, Kate replied. We would share our Level 1 defensive systems and peaceful technologies. Medical devices, environmental restoration tools, faster-than-light communication systems. And your advanced weapons? Vexhai pressed. Those stay locked away, Admiral Bennett said firmly. The galaxy doesn't need planet crackers and star killers. It needs healers and builders. The synthesis spoke again, its voice carrying the weight of eons. The architects believed that true galactic civilization was possible only when species learned to limit themselves voluntarily. They were willing to sacrifice their own freedom to preserve that possibility. Elder Zarthun looked up from his datapad. I've been reviewing our historical records. Every major galactic conflict in the past 50,000 years was caused by species trying to dominate others through superior firepower. Exactly, Dr. Palmer said. The cycle of escalation never ends if everyone keeps building bigger weapons. Eventually, someone creates something so destructive that it ends civilization entirely. So what do you propose? Supreme Chancellor Vexhai asked. Ambassador Kate returned to the table with a formal document. The Galactic Ethical Restraint Charter. All member species agree to limit their weapons development to level 3 or below. Disputes are resolved through negotiation, economic pressure, or limited police actions. And if someone breaks the agreement? War Chief Crix asked. Then the other species work together to stop them, Admiral Bennett replied. But the goal is always to restore peace, not to punish or destroy. What about species that refuse to join? Nira wondered. The synthesis answered this question. They are left alone unless they threaten others. The charter is an invitation, not a conquest. The negotiations continued for 3 days. The coalition representatives struggled with concepts that challenged everything they believed about power and survival. But gradually they began to understand the human perspective. On the final day, Supreme Chancellor Vexhai made the announcement that would change galactic history. The coalition accepts the Galactic Ethical Restraint Charter. We will begin dismantling our planet-killer weapons immediately. War Chief Crix added his own commitment. The coalition military will restructure around defensive and peacekeeping operations. Conquest is no longer our goal. As the representatives prepared to return to their homeworlds, the synthesis spoke privately to the human delegation. The architects would be proud. You have chosen wisdom over power, just as they did. Will you stay and help guide the new galactic government? Ambassador Kate asked. For a time, the synthesis replied. But eventually you must learn to make these decisions without ancient guidance. That is the final lesson of the architects. Admiral Bennett looked around the room one last time. So this is how it ends? Not with humanity conquering the galaxy, but with everyone agreeing to limit themselves. Dr. Palmer smiled. That's not an ending, Admiral. That's a beginning. For the first time in galactic history, we have a chance at real peace. Captain Jake Morrison, who had been quietly observing the proceedings, spoke up. The aliens weren't stunned because we had powerful weapons. They were stunned because we chose not to use them. And that choice, Ambassador Kate added, made us stronger than any weapon ever could. The Treaty of Border Station 7 was signed by all 12 coalition,